would say about sovereignty is, you'll like this, I think, Manda. I first was introduced to it working with a shamanic practitioner who was talking about energetic sovereignty, right? She introduced this to me. This was 25 years ago. It was 1998. And we were doing work, and she was talking about, from a shamanic point of view, the significance of having energetic sovereignty so that you don't have other energies in your field. And I was like, oh, I was really attracted. There's a quality to the word that I really loved. And I think that there is an appeal that many of us have to the kind of regal quality that can go with sovereignty when we think of royalty, for example, the regal part. And what I've wanted to do is say there are qualities of this energy, of this word, that are appealing to us. And the best sovereigns, historically, were always benevolent. They were always concerned about the well-being of their people. They were always concerned about the well-being of the land. And we have historical antecedents of the few who were like that. And so I want to reclaim this possibility. And I don't quite know what you think about this, but I've read about the sovereignty goddess, right, who is an ancient pre-Roman, old Europe figure who was the one who chose and joined with the king, representing the land, to say, she was the one who said, okay, I think we can trust him. We're going to select him, and joined with him. And then she could remove him if he was not acting appropriately and protecting the people and all of that, right? And so for me, that's and this is my ancestry, and this is something that I find really interesting and appealing, because then we have a more of a balance of masculine and feminine during that time. And so, not to try to return to that past or something, but to be like, where is there juice for us in that idea? And one of the things with the modern sovereignty and individualism is that it's this idea that you're an autonomous being has this independence. But actually, if you look at sovereignty, you can't be a sovereign on your own. You're a sovereign because you have a people, or you have a domain, you have a terrain, you have something that you are responsible for. You have something that you are, again, in the highest expression, right? We've seen a lot of dictators, a lot of authoritarianism, royalty is rife with that. And yet, in its highest expression, it's about how do we step into really taking responsibility for that which is within our purview and helping it to heal, to thrive, and to be, in its highest expression. So that's the kind of energy of sovereignty that I want to invoke, because the problem with individualism is it really focuses on rights. It's like, these are my rights. And I'm like, where is the responsibility that goes with those rights? And this is a big problem that we historically have in this country. And so it's like, we have to balance rights with responsibility, which is where, for an adolescent, right, that is the shift from adolescence into adulthood, is to take on responsibility, personal responsibility first for our own actions and our behavior and our words and all of that. But then responsibility as a member of the tribe or a member of the community. And this is the missing piece that I think I certainly want to invoke in terms of what sovereignty can give us. And so that was also the place where I, have been working with sovereignty to look at how do I take responsibility, in the early years, how do I take responsibility for my own energy field, right? Which is what that practitioner had said to me. I was like, oh my gosh, I'd never even thought, number one, that was there, and number two, that I needed to do it, and I didn't know how to do it. It was like a new thing for me at the time. But how do I take responsibility for my emotional state, for my physical vitality, for, for how I show up in the world, for the things that are inside, in my ability to care for. And so that started as a kind of personal exploration, but it grew a lot, really during the pandemic when we saw this uprising of people around the world after George Floyd was murdered. And, so many white people were like, wow, I got to wake up to my privilege. I have to wake up to systemic racism and how this is really damaging to huge portions of our population. And it's take on some responsibility for unraveling that white supremacy, right? That systemic racism. So for me, sovereignty is about that too. It's like, how do we become more sovereign and more caring and more compassionate and more inclusive of all the world's people? And then, of course, through Topia and Accidental Gods, I've been exposed to so many different opportunities for how do we do that for our living world. And so many examples that you highlight that show how people are doing that in so many different places. So for me, sovereignty is about all of that. And that's why also I call it out explicitly by the end of the book, which is about becoming sovereign stewards, right? How do we become stewards?
Let's go inwards before we go outwards, though.
Yes,
there's a lot still to unpick in that.